By any chance, have you messed with Severance Enclosure? If not, you should. It's doing a lot more than it says. And I saw a thumbnail from Dado not too long ago. Saw a picture of Severance Enclosure. It just said yes about the buff. And I thought, I need to check that out. So I have a special one for you guys today. And hopefully it doesn't get changed. I don't see a reason for it to change. And I plan to go through all those buffed exotics that we had. I've done Mechaniers, Triton Vice, plan to do Bombardiers. You know I'm doing Bombardiers. And the others too. But Severance Enclosure, not only can it do more, there's even things you can build on top of it to do even more. And you might have seen it do some funny things. I know how it's doing those funny things. I'm going to show you what you need to do for it to do that. We need to see where we came from to see where we are. There are some strict guidelines for it to follow now. And I've been following Severance Enclosure for a while now. And its new buff changed one of the fundamental flaws that it had. About 3-4 years ago, I made the Bonk Enclosure video, a fun video, PvP focused. Basically, with the Bonk Hammer and the Crucible, what you had on Severance Enclosure, the final blows that you had with it will cause the Severance Enclosure to happen at the point of the bonk. So away from you on the target that you hit, and it results in collaterals. Back then in PvE, the Severance Explosion, when it procced, the explosion point was from your character, not away from you like it was in the Crucible, so it's not nearly as good. But with this update, it changed to have it work with that ranged melee. So now, just like it did before years ago in the Crucible, the point of your melee, ranged or not, will be where that happens, instead of it just coming from your character. That's a big change, a huge change. The exotic perk is Pheromatic Trigger. Powered melee final blows unleash a damaging explosion. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the radius and damage of that explosion. So for the buff, they increase the size and damage of the explosion from where it was, and kills with the exotic's explosion now triggers an additional explosion. Almost like chain reaction a little bit. So check it out. And with what I'm getting ready to go through, there's more to do and more you should do. The explosion has always been pretty powerful, but not practical. Like I'm on Bonk Hammer here, we're on Solar Titan. You get that throwing hammer final blow, the explosion happens, the target explodes, there's a secondary explosion now, just nuking the area. That's cool. That's really good, all things considered. On a Solar Titan, we also have Roaring Flames going. That's important. Final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of your solar abilities, stacks to 3 times. I'm going to go through the other subclasses, but keywords come up. With Severance Enclosure on, yes, you have your finishers. Yes, you have the Bonk Hammer. That procs the Severance Enclosure explosion. But if and only if you have on Roaring Flames, that's also going to make your regular uncharged melee do Severance Explosions. And as I continue, we're going to see what's going on here. This means each regular melee that you do, no hammer in hand, it's gone, you're going to proc those Severance Explosions. And how it's doing that is the keyword in Roaring Flames, buffing solar abilities. It's making your regular melee a powerful melee, essentially, and the game's reading it as a powerful melee from the Roaring Flames buff. Therefore, Severance Enclosure is treating that as a powerful melee. And what's wild about solar, you start getting to the artifact mods. I mean, the class is pretty good, it has built-in resto, we have sunspots, but this is also going to proc Revitalizing Blast. Causing damage with a solar ability weakens champions and bosses for a short time. So like right here at altars, I run up to one of the nightmares, just start meleeing them, it debuffs them, and on top of that, just punching them over and over, it's going to spark an ignition. Very, very cool. I'm going to come back to this. On Void, check this out. I've been working with this exotic for about a week with all the things to come up with. The same thing can happen on Void. You have your regular, throw the shield, maybe do the shield bash, that charge melee, you get the final blow, Severance Enclosure is going to go off. But for Severance Enclosure to work on uncharged melees, as we saw on Solar, we need Bastion, throw the shield, get the overshield, we know. But what makes it possible is if and only if you have on Offensive Bulwark. While you have an overshield, you have faster grenade regen, you have increased melee range and damage. Melee final blows extend the duration of your overshield. So when you have an overshield, that means you're going to have Offensive Bulwark up. And as long as Offensive Bulwark is up, any uncharged melee, when you get a final blow, is going to trigger Severance Enclosure. And how that's happening, just how it did with Solar, the game is reading that extended melee range and damage from Offensive Bulwark as a powerful melee, and that's proccing Severance Enclosure. You need Offensive Bulwark for it to work. On Arc, super easy, same deal. You can do the Ballistic Slam, your charged melee final blow. That's going to get Severance to proc, but for the uncharged melee proc, you need Knockout. Critically winning a target or breaking the shields is giving you increased melee range and damage. So again, the aspects augmenting the melee, the game's reading it as a powerful melee, and that's how Severance Enclosure goes off. And before I keep going, since it's already a powerful melee, it's reading it as a powerful melee. Whatever element you're on, let's take Void. I have Offensive Bulwark up, I have that overshield. If you have a golden tricorn weapon, like the Shire's Wrath, you can get a kill with it. As long as I have an overshield and I have Offensive Bulwark up, regular uncharged melees is going to proc to trigger golden tricorn ×2. That goes for any of your golden tricorn weapons on these subclasses. We have Subjunctive. Arc, the reissued weapon from the season. It has golden tricorn. As long as knockout is up, the regular melees count as powerful melees, essentially. That procs the explosions, and it also counts as the second part of golden tricorn to get you to ×2. And at this point, you might be wondering about the crucible. The same rules apply. Kinda stupid, like right here. I use my ballistic slam. The charged melee is gone, but I have knockout procced. I'm on arc. I melee the closest to me, and that procs Severance Enclosure. It collaterals 2 other enemies, and I keep going. As long as you have knockout up, very easy to do on Arc Titan when it comes to the Crucible, or PvE for that matter. You just break a shield. Your regular melee is going to proc Severance Enclosure. And speaking of Arc, I had a game on Anomaly right before I made the video when I kind of figured out Golden Tricorn worked. I was using that Golden Tricorn subjective and just aping with this thing. Knockout up, melee final blows, collaterals, couple points. I got Golden Tricorn ×2 up. And I jumped in this game with about a minute going by, so I jumped in at 9 minutes. I had 35 defeats with it, and this is a special situation. It's a really close quarters map. I can confidently run around with an SMG, but also keep in mind, yeah, I'm using a Golden Tricorn weapon, but if I have knockout up, maybe a shotgun beatdown, maybe at mid-range, I break a shield, knockouts on the screen, as long as that's up, and let's say I just double beat down someone else, Severance Enclosure will proc. It's wild. Same thing in PvP with Void and Solar. Like with Void, as long as I have an overshield up, that means I have Bulwark up, any melee final blow will proc that explosion. Pretty cool. And what's weird, in PvE, Solar is fast, efficient, and easy to get going with Severance Enclosure. The Bonk, Roaring Flames, you just go, but in PvP, Solar is kind of the hardest. And at this point, you might be wondering about Stasis and Strand. For whatever reason, this exotic does not work with those uncharged melees. On Strand, let's say you get a Lash Final Blow, sure, that'll proc a Severance Explosion, it's a charged melee. And when you do that, let's say you have Banner of War up, and we know Banner of War augments your melee for more damage, makes it more powerful. But this exotic does not work. In simple terms, as far as the uncharged melee proccing Severance, as we saw with Void, Solar, Arc, it only works on light subclasses, and I would assume that it has to do with the coding of it. But in PvE, it's a powerful thing that it does. And what I want and need you to remember, aside from a GM, and super side note, for whatever reason, like whatever reason at all, I don't know why people have to say this, oh, I would never take that in a GM. Sure, you probably shouldn't, but let's not act like everyone every single day loads up Destiny and plays only GMs, because you don't. There's a lot of activities to do. We'll take the coil. And as far as this and something like the coil, especially in those later stages, what you should do, what you can do, utilize these explosions. There's a lot of ads. You'll just nuke areas. And when the time comes, and I'm on controller here, I'll take Solar as an example, switch over to a second loadout, and the only thing that's changed is Severance Enclosure with Pyrogale. You have your super, do a loadout switch, pop your super, do the thing. As you're doing the thing, switch right back to Severance Enclosure. That's how that should play out. On all of them, get those benefits. Whether you're Solar, Void, Arc, you have knockout up, start nuking everything with Severance Enclosure. When the time comes, switch over to Falling Star, do the big Thunder Crash, go back. It works with the artifact mods, as you saw. There's a lot of things at your disposal. Golden Tricorn, and as I played more and more with it, because of this, that uncharged part, it's making this exotic punch way above its weight. It's awesome. Try it out. And those guidelines, light subclass, an aspect that augments the melee, that essentially makes it a powerful melee. Solar, it's because of Roaring Flames. Arc is because of knockout. Void is because of offensive bulwark. And you can set up your fragments to augment how those work. Use the kit of the subclass, maybe even going invisible with Void when you do a finisher. That also gets the Severance procs. Do whatever you want. Then switch over when you need to and switch back. This thing's pretty awesome. You can have a lot of fun with it. And it also works in the Crucible. Go try it out. If you're new here, remember to hit the subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, thank you so much for your support. Let's talk about Severance Enclosure down below. What are some things that you found, some things that you like? Were you able to get those uncharged melees going with Strand, with Stasis? If so, let us know. Let's talk about it. Thank you for watching. And until the next one, I am CoolGuy.